Hi, my name's Sonia and this is my channel, See It Then, See It Now. In today's video I took a plastic egg and a plant pot and turned them into something really beautiful. Let's take a look. I of course started with the egg, and for once, believe it or not, I actually thought about how I was going to put this all together before making it beautiful and then thinking, how am I going to attach it? So the very first thing that I did was put a hole in the bottom of the plastic egg. I used a wood bending tool, which is actually technically broken, but it worked perfectly for melting the hole into the bottom of this plastic. If you ever do this though with heat, lots of ventilation is a must. The fumes were not pleasant. I made the hole big enough so that the twig that I'm going to use for the stem would fit through, and then just tidied up the edges. Next, I glued the two halves of the egg together using a mixture of Gorilla Glue and hot glue. I wanted it to be nice and sturdy before I got messy with it. And messy we got. I gave the shiny surface a quick scuff sand just to take the sheen off. I then stuck an old paintbrush handle into the hole so I had something to hold on to, and then covered the whole thing with filler. I smeared it on with a palette knife and then dabbed over it with a sponge to create a bit of texture. And here's another organised moment. I'd even decided where this wet wobbly egg was going to sit and live before I covered it in filler. No wandering around the craft room trying to balance it on random objects this time. No, I propped it up in a heavy glass vase filled with all sorts of bits and pieces, and the paintbrush handle balanced it there perfectly. While that was drying, I grabbed a stamp with writing on and I stamped onto a single ply of napkin just one of the layers that I'd peeled off from a previous decoupage project. If you do this though, put a piece of paper underneath because the ink definitely goes all the way through the piece of napkin. Once the filler was dry, I tore the napkin into pieces and decoupaged them randomly around the top half of the egg. This is one of those forgiving surfaces. You don't have to worry about wrinkles because the texture has everything. I didn't cover the whole egg, just patches of writing here and there. Once it was dry, I sealed it with Mod Podge. I mixed some white and a tiny bit of titanium buff acrylic paint. I wanted the egg to be off-white, not fully buff, so I didn't go too heavy with it, and I painted all the areas that weren't covered in napkin. To age the lettering, I went in with some dark wax. I concentrated it more around the edges of the napkin pieces, and then when there was barely anything left on the brush, I lightly brushed over the centre where the writing was. Once I was happy with that, I hot glued some pretty lace around the bottom half of the egg. This lace actually came off a blouse that had gone grey and sad, but the lace itself was still lovely and white, so obviously I kept it for a that'll come in handy one day moment. The trickiest part here was keeping the egg still. It really wanted to just roll around everywhere. I had to snip the lace in a few places so that I could curve it nicely without overlapping it too much. To cover the rough edge where the lace had finished, I decided which part was going to be the front, and I knew that I wanted the bow to come down the right hand side. So I started wrapping some burlap ribbon around the centre, making sure that I covered the lace edge and making sure that I was even all the way around. I used a tape measure to make sure that I kept it level, and I started the ribbon on the right hand side so that the join would sit underneath the bow. I then laid boucle ribbon over the top of the burlap, leaving an even amount of burlap showing on each side. And then it was time for the bow. I don't know if it's just me, but does anyone else get slightly anxious when it comes to making bows? I don't know what it is. I think because I used to struggle so much when I first started making bows that I always feel this tiny sense of impending doom whenever I go to make one, even a simple one like this. Anyway, I cut a piece of ribbon of both ribbons and glued the boucle onto the burlap like I did around the egg. I then made 2 equal loops and secured them in the middle with wire, and then I glued them onto the egg. See, crisis averted, no major stress, so simple, but yeah, for some reason, always get nervous. Now for the really fun bit. I started layering leaves and flowers around the bow, some tucked underneath, some slightly over the top. I just played around until it looked really pretty. For the centre of the bow, I glued 2 buttons together and added a little clay rose. Underneath the egg just needed tidying up, so I added a little bit more lace and that completed the egg. Now for the pot. This pot has been in my stash for at least a year. It was on sale at Tesco's for a grand total of £3, so obviously it came on with me. I didn't mind the colour, but I wanted more of a grey brown tone and I wanted a bit more visual texture. So I put white, grey, burnt sienna, raw umber and buff onto a plate and just started dabbing, using a brush, using a sponge, more dabbing, and at one point it did go a little bit muddy, so I leaned more back towards the grey and I just adjusted as I went, so darker here, lighter there, a bit of white if it got too dark, and I just kept layering and blending until it felt right. Once I was happy with the way that it looked, I sealed it with a coat of clear matte varnish. Now for the stem. About 2 years ago, maybe a bit longer because time just disappears, I was out walking and I found 2 twigs on the floor and I thought I could do something with those, because of course I did. I brought them home, put them in the garage, intended to research how to treat them and then completely forgot that I had them. Fast forward to this project. I'm online looking at twigs and they're more expensive than I expected them to be. Quite a lot of them were too thin or too short, and then I suddenly remembered about my garage twigs. I rescued them from the garage. I picked the strongest one and I checked it wasn't soft. I sanded off any loose bits, wiped it down with a damp cloth and then sealed it with PVA. Not only am I glad that I picked them up, but I'm also glad I remembered that I had them. Now, attaching everything together was not my finest moment. I really struggled. I could not get the egg, just kept wobbling. I couldn't get it to just glue and stay still. So in the end, I wrapped masking tape around the stem to make the fit tighter, and then I just used absolutely loads of glue to secure it in place. The base of the pot was filled with floral foam and I glued the stick into that. To cover the floral foam, I used some of this filler. I don't really know what this is. I already had it from an old arrangement and I've searched for what it's called, and Excelsior or Spanish moss are the closest that I can find, but I couldn't find any that was exactly like this. But whatever it is, it covers the foam beautifully and literally takes no time at all to do it. Now for the final detail on the pot, and I had put a piece of rope around the dip section, but I did feel like it just needed something else. So I stamped some lettering onto some card and cut it out to make a label. I aged it with some dark wax, darker around the edges, the same way that I had with the lettering on the egg. I glued together some of the same pieces of ribbon that I'd used on the egg, using hot glue. I then attached the little cardboard label to the front of this with PVA. And that was it. It made a pretty little decorative label for the front of the pot. All that was left to do was to glue it onto the front of the pot. And that completed the whole piece. So let's have a reminder and see it then. And let's see it now. I love how something so simple can be turned into something so elegant, and that you don't need expensive materials to make something beautiful. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Would you ever go at doing this? Let me know. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. I've got lots more upcycles coming. I've got the bedroom reveal coming. I've got news on the next room makeover coming too. There's lots going on, and there's lots of bits that are nearly ready, so hopefully we'll be getting those to you very soon. I will also be posting updates on Facebook and Instagram, so you feel free to follow me on there too. All that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll see you very soon in the next one. Bye!